if you saw the email that went out about what we were going to talk about today and what I'm going to talk about, I think the title was, "It's None of My Business What Anybody Thinks About Me." And I know that has been coming up a lot for a lot of people about worrying or feeling maybe threatened, even though no one's threatening you, but feeling as though you can't speak your mind or you can't be who you are. And so I thought it was an appropriate topic because I'm blending it in with several things. I'm blending it in with authenticity, understanding how to be authentic, and then also understanding how to find your voice, how to begin to recognize what is your voice, and then how do you take that voice, or how do you take those feelings that you have around feeling as though others will criticize you or judge you, and how do you sort of not worry about that? And I know it's been said a lot of times, and it is true, the older you get, the less you're concerned with what others think about you. And I know for myself, I've definitely in the last, say, 10 years, sort of gotten to that point, because also I was raised to think about, well, what would others think if you do this, or you take this action, or you participate in something, or you have a different belief now than something else. What would others think? And of course, that mainly comes from our families. And then we also have what I call pressure of society, and society also frames a lot of beliefs and thoughts around us. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but then I also want to open this up for conversation and discussion to talk about how you believe that you could begin to step into your own authentic self if you aren't already clear with who you are, and also understanding what your authenticity is and how you speak up. But what really is important is that a lot of our lack of authenticity, and I say authenticity about being congruent, not that you're doing or saying anything wrong, but you want to be authentic to yourself. That's what's important. And when you're authentic to yourself, then you're authentic to everyone else. So it starts with you. But a lot of times, being out of sync with speaking your truth comes from a lot of personal wounds or personal pain from other situations. So if we really get into what this is all about, it's really about the daily practice of letting go of who we think we are and who we think others think we are. And I remember someone saying this to me not too long ago, is that if we think a lot of people are talking about us or would disapprove of us, we must recognize we're not that important. Because there's a lot of people that really don't think about you. Maybe you've had an interaction with them at some point and you had a disagreement, but in reality they move on and you move on. But sometimes, especially in business, if you're an independent business person, or even in your job or career, sometimes you've got this little voice in your head. If you've had a situation that maybe didn't turn out great, or you're ready to step out and start a business or continue your business, and then all these fears come up is, what would people think about me if I'm stepping out and I'm doing this kind of work? And the reality is that you're really not that important. People really aren't thinking about that. And what you want to be able to move to is that, how do I move forward to do what I came here to do, what my purpose is, and how do I push forward in that and develop what I call my point of view. What is my point of view of the world, or what is my point of view of things around me? And I've thought a lot about this, and even in my own growth and my own development, I realized that I really hadn't thought about, what is my point of view in the world? What is my point of view around certain things? What do I believe versus others? Or what do I feel versus others? And it's really a good exercise to think about that, and to take sometimes what I would call general topics in the world and ask yourself, what do I think about this? Do I really know about this? Do I have all the facts? Do I have enough to make an opinion about something? Because I also know, and I've experienced this, and I know a lot of you may have experienced this, but we tend sometimes as humans to kind of join what I call the herd. We join the herd, we listen to what they say, and then all of a sudden we're saying that, but we really don't even know what we're talking about. We really don't even know, like we haven't even researched it. We really don't even know the facts. We're just joining in because your friends are joining in or someone else is joining in. And I've gotten very, very, shall I say, clear in today's world about, I want to really know, what do I believe and what can I check out to be the truth of what I believe. And right now, you know, in society, it's really hard because there's a lot of untruth out there. There's a lot of truth, but there's a lot of untruth in the world right now, and we have to navigate this, and that's not easy. And so I was never, even growing up, even though I grew up playing on teams, and where I learned teamwork was in sports. And I understood what it was like to be on a team, but I also understood what it was like to be part of a team. But I also realized that even beyond that, in sports, I was not a group joiner. I did not join a lot of groups because I always found myself being perhaps not fully engaged in what the group believed because I wanted to seek my own truth. And I think that that's really important for many of us today, especially those of you that are seeking what I call your spiritual life, your spiritual connection. So let me give you a couple of tips and information about beginning to work on finding your voice and being able to feel firm and clear and strong in who you are. And it doesn't have to be a big thing, it can be small things. But as an example, what is authenticity? Because you must be more authentic to yourself before you can be authentic to others. So if you're not recognizing how you're feeling with yourself about certain things, then others are going to recognize it in however you present yourself. So authenticity is living in alignment with your soul and with your values. And if you haven't really taken the time to say, what are my values? Really, it's a good exercise to sit down. And I know when I started really working on what are my values, I literally sat down and I went on the internet and said, what are values? You know, what do they look like? What are human values? Because I needed a reference to start working with myself. Also, being authentic is honoring your emotions without being ruled by them. And that goes back to really not being a victim, is not getting caught up in victimism and letting emotions carry you forward in maybe ways that you don't want to carry forward. It's also about speaking your truth, even when your voice shakes. How many times have you been somewhere and you want to speak your truth and you could feel, I really need to say this, but my voice is shaking, I'm feeling nervous. That, honestly, is your truth is coming up. And your body is not used to your truth being spoken. And that's why you're having, a lot of times, the emotional reaction. In a lot of personal development programs, when people are engaging in maybe a group sessions or really working on themselves, sometimes they start to feel nervous or they get a headache or maybe their voice is shaking. That means right there their body is transitioning their truth. It's coming up. And so it's important to recognize. And then the other part is knowing that you're enough without having to be validated. It took me a long time in business to literally pat myself on the back and not care if anyone ever said I did a good job or not. because I knew I did a good job. And I wasn't egotistical about it. I was like, I did a good job. This worked. But I didn't need anyone to tell me that. And that took a while to get to that point. And I started with just little things. And again, I always talk about little red flags lead to big red flags. Well, little acknowledgments to yourself lead to big acknowledgments. And if you can acknowledge yourself without feeling that you have to have acknowledgement from others, you'll find that you get acknowledgement from others. You'll find that people will acknowledge you, and they will value you, and they'll value your opinion. The other part is, why do we struggle? Why do we struggle to speak our truth? I mean, if you really think about that, if there's something in our brain, our conscious mind, that sometimes want to control what we're thinking, what we're doing, or it's the voices of our family, our parents, our siblings, our teachers, society. There's all these voices rumbling around in our head. And so what happens is we're afraid of judgment. We're afraid of being too much. We are worried, what will people think? We also have what I call, sometimes many of us have at least some kind of trauma, but it may not be trauma in the way that I'm speaking of trauma. It could have been that someone just said something to you when you were a child, and that immediately framed your world. I think I told the story before in this group of the young woman who was helping her teacher hang artwork. And as she was holding the art and handing it to the teacher, and she was taping it to the wall along the hallway. And the teacher looked down at this one piece of artwork and said, "Oh my, that poor child, she is not creative. She does not know how to draw or create anything." Well, it was the little girl's artwork. And so she immediately froze. And in that moment, she bought completely that she was not creative. And she never told the teacher. And from that point on, she did not even attempt to be creative. And it really scarred her in terms of her creativity. And the beautiful thing about that is eventually, later in life, she decided to step into that. She decided to step through that fear. And she participated in a program, and it totally opened her up and helped her realize that she was creative. And then she spoke her truth. She spoke her truth and said, "I am creative." And she went on to create some beautiful artwork in her life. So sometimes we get that, we have that trauma. We have that moment where someone did something. The other part around this is people pleasing. We're all taught to people please. At least I know those of us in the South, we're definitely taught to people please. And then the other part is guilt or shame around wanting to stand up, wanting to be. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be acknowledged or wanting to be noticed, but then you feel this shame around, oh no, I shouldn't do that, and I need to step back into the shadows and not be important. There are certain people that sometimes when I'm in classes or working with others, I can look at them and say, oh, I see, you like to be invisible. You like to stand back in the shadows, and they're good at it. But yet they don't always speak their truth. They just kind of stand back in the shadows and they observe. And that's okay, but then observing is a great way to learn, but eventually you want to be able to take that in and allow those observations to help you begin to carve out who you want to be. And so that to me is a very important part, is to not step into the guilt or shame. Brene Brown is a leader in the world that talks about shame and guilt, and she says we all have it, whether we realize it or not, from something that may have happened, or at some point in our life we were shamed or we were made to feel guilty about something we did. I remember one time I was playing, like I said, in high school, I played basketball, and I remember after the game, we had won this game, and I had done well. I was a forward, and I'd scored a lot of points. And after the game was over, I came out, and I was, one of the parents of the other team members looked at me and said, wow, you were amazing tonight. You did a great job. You know, I'm just, wow, that's so great. The team won. And I went, I know I did. I mean, I just acknowledged that I did. And I'll never forget that my father, when I got home, he completely berated me for saying that. He said, don't you ever speak back to someone like that. And he goes, that was very flippant. You should never have said that. And I was like, you know, for me, you know, a high schooler, I was like, well, I was just expressing myself. I wasn't being egotistical, but my father saw that as that way. And I never forgot that. And I know that I shrunk back a lot when I did achieve things. I didn't acknowledge it. I wouldn't acknowledge my achievements. And I kind of played them down like, oh no, it's not that big of a deal. So that was something that I had to overcome eventually. And it was just that very simple statement. And it was just my father's opinion that you shouldn't acknowledge yourself. And I realized later, as I, you know, grew up and became an adult and did a lot of work myself, I realized that my father had low self-esteem and low self-value. And so he felt that others should have that as well. So this is where we get stopped in speaking our truth. Now, the other thing that I've said a lot in my presentations and over the years is that stop playing small. We all play small. And that's part of not wanting to step out and speak your truth. But again, speak your truth. Don't speak your truth of other groups. Don't speak your truth of what your friends believe or what others believe. And I think that's one of the hardest parts of our lives, is to truly be clear on what our truth is. But what I also know, from a spiritual perspective, we also want to take in and be a spiritual being. And I talk about that we are literally light beings. We are eternal light beings. We're spiritual beings. And now there's a way to speak your truth and to be spiritual and not push your truth or be aggressive about your truth or even be a bully about your truth. You know, we're seeing a lot of that right now. We're seeing lots of bullies that want to talk over you or push you and tell you what their truth is, but they're saying it in an angry way. They're saying it, they're using words, they're using energy. There's a way to speak your truth and not come from anger at all. It's because you're secure, you're calm, and you can speak your truth with power. And that is what's important, is to be able to be powerful when you speak your truth and to speak it from a place of power. But it can be done with calm, peace, and a spiritual foundation, and from love. Love is the factor here. Love is the key word, is that when we come from love, when we love ourselves, then we really don't have to be concerned about what others think about us, because we're coming from a place of love. And I'm a big believer that love is the solution to everything, but we have to find it in ourselves first. And when we find it in ourselves, then this love begins to surround us. Because what happens is you truly are blessed. When you can feel love within yourself, you're blessed, because we are blessed beings. So also speak your truth unapologetically. You know, literally, you don't have to apologize when you speak your truth. And, you know, you can even use terms like I feel instead of you always. You know, there are words to use when you want to stand up for something, or even just have a conversation with someone and explain to them how you feel. Also is, you know, it's good to daily have a daily affirmation of yourself. Say, I'm going to speak my truth today. I'm going to be calm, I'm going to be peaceful, and I'm going to speak how I feel in the moment that I feel it. And that is something we don't always do. Because if you don't speak how you feel in the moment that you feel it, when you leave that situation, it becomes regret. And then you carry the energy of regret. I should have said this. I should have stood up. I should have, been different. Because now you're shaming yourself. You're really kind of beating yourself up now. I should have done this and I didn't do it. So there's a part of you that has to kind of move beyond that and say, you know what? Next time I'll be different. But let me get clear on how I can do that. And that's, use it as an example. Use it as a situation that you learn from. Also, learn to sit in discomfort. Learn, especially if you're uncomfortable around others because they don't think like you do. It's not going to destroy you. I mean, I'll tell you, it's an interesting situation. I am a very different thinker about a lot of things. And I remember in school, my daughter was in middle school. And I remember they had a class where they invited all the mothers in and all the daughters to just talk about, they're in middle school and, that's when a lot of emotions begin to erupt with young girls. And so the teacher did a presentation on, emotions and how the girls could be sometimes and how we as mothers could support our daughters. And then she did this exercise. And in this exercise, she asked questions and things like, do you think your daughter should do this? And if the answer is yes, go to this side of the room. If the answer is no, go to this side of the room. Well, I started to notice throughout the night, I'm the only one going to the yes wall, and all the other mothers are going to the no wall. And I'm standing there going, wow, they're pretty controlling, because what was happening is I was definitely a different thinker. I had a different perspective, and I also sort of took it a little further than what the question was. I tried to think through that, and that how would I work with my daughter in this situation? And so that was, I think, the first time that I realized that I was definitely a different thinker, a different viewer of things, but I also wanted to understand why the other mothers were on the no wall. So I felt it was important at that point, like, okay, I want to have conversations with some of them. Explain to me, why do you feel that way? And so it became a conversation instead of a, I'm on the no wall, they're on the yes wall, or I'm on the yes wall and they're on the no wall. And that opened me up to understand. And I will say that my goal, and especially in the work that I do and the teachings that I do, I really do want to understand the other side, but I also realize that sometimes the other side is not willing to want to participate. And the other part is around your authenticity and not worrying about what others think is setting boundaries. And we do have to set boundaries. And we do have to recognize when others want to push into our boundaries. If you truly understand your point of view, who you are, you have your voice, and you set your boundaries, then yeah, there probably will be conflict occasionally when you're standing up for what you believe and what you know. But the reality is that that's going to happen. And what you must do is then say, look, this is my boundary. This is part of who I am. This is part of my authenticity, is that I can't allow this to happen. I can't allow you to treat me this way, or I can't allow you to speak to me that way. That's my boundary. And that doesn't mean that, I'm not standing up, because I am standing up for myself. And that's something that's important in work. It's important in your relationships. It's important with your friends. Everyone around you, any kind of relationship that you're in, you want to be able to set your boundaries. And then the other part is, you really don't, it's like they say, you don't really owe anyone a version of yourself that keeps them comfortable. Think about that. You don't have to change to make someone comfortable. Now, if you're creating conflict, that's different. But you don't have to change to make someone comfortable. You only owe yourself who you are. And that is, to me, I've encountered that where maybe I've changed my behavior to, or maybe my behavior makes someone uncomfortable, but perhaps I'm literally speaking my truth. And they may, well, I don't feel that way, and maybe they get uncomfortable, but that's their issue, not mine. And we have to recognize that sometimes. But the goal is to not enter in conflict. And if conflict arises, then my way is that we're moving into conflict, so I'm going to move on. If we can't calm this down, if we can't listen to each other, or if we can't share with each other, then we need to move on. And that's how sometimes you avoid individuals that may or may not respect you and who you are. You move away from that. So it's like, I don't really care what anyone thinks about me. However, I need to be loving, I need to be respectful, and I need to be spiritual and peaceful. And I'm not saying that we're perfect all the time. There are situations that arise, and maybe the tiger within you comes out, and maybe that was appropriate. Maybe that was what was needed at that time. But again, it's about, you have to come from a place of peace and love and understanding and wanting to understand. And that kind of leads me to where you also want to understand where your anger lies and where your rage lies. Because some people, what happens is when they're working on themselves, sometimes they need to release rage or they need to release anger. They're carrying it and they need to let it go. In fact, that's when most people become the most peaceful and the most calm, is after they let all that rage out. As long as they're not raging at you or it's moving into a situation that's not positive. But the point is that if you're uncomfortable and you find yourself being aggressive when you want to speak your truth about something, and you feel this anger coming up, it's like you need to notice that. You need to recognize that and work on it. Because it means that you haven't fully aligned yourself with what you're saying or what you're believing. So I think what I think is most important in like today and what we're talking about is really stepping into more of your spiritual self and how you do that. I like to be able to give you a handout so that when you leave, you've got something to refer to, and you've also got kind of a step-by-step or suggestions or something along these lines. And what I want to do is I'm going to pass this around, and I want to talk a little bit about this because I think this could be a good guide to help you just kind of do an assessment of yourself. Is like, well, what is it? What lights me up? What makes me feel great? What is it that I love to do? And, sometimes when you get really focused on what you think your purpose is or what your passion is or what you can move forward in, you don't worry about what's going on around you. You really don't. I mean, I know that when I, like even when I opened this business, at first I resisted opening this business. So let me say that I had a very cushy situation. I'd retired from the corporate world. I was doing consulting, I was doing spiritual work, and I was really happy. and then I started getting messages from Spirit that, open a business, open a retail business. I didn't know anything about retail. And I was like, no, retail, oh my gosh, that's 7 days a week, you got to have employees, all these things. But the messages kept coming. But the bigger message was create a community. Create a place where people can come. And so I moved forward in creating this business, and I realized over time, this really lit me up. I really liked it. I really enjoyed being able to chat with customers on a daily basis and to feel and believe as though I was helping people in the moment that they walked in. Because there were a lot of people who were going through a lot of things, especially during the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic, our doors opened and people flowed in. And many people were saying, I don't know who I am anymore. To realize I'm in a toxic environment. I've had time to realize that I really don't want to be in this relationship. And they were saying, but I don't know where to start. I want to be more spiritual. I want to love myself. I don't want to be in these situations anymore. And I realized that there was a reason that we were here. And that was to support and guide individuals the best that we could, and at least give them something that they could get started with. And so that's really where you start to find who you are. And that's when I really started questioning, who am I? Who am I? What should I be doing? And, you know, as my husband would say, why aren't you retired yet? You know, and I was like, I know, am I crazy starting a business, you know, now that I'm retired? But the point was, it was meant to be. It was definitely for me to keep moving forward. And now I realize I'll never stop. I'll never stop, because now I have stepped into what I believe is my purpose. And what I believe is why I'm here and why I have all the experience that I had in the past. I mean, I worked in the corporate world for almost 30 years. And even though I loved my jobs, I had amazing jobs, I didn't fit. I never fit. I was never really the full corporate person. I didn't play politics. And to a certain extent, I really didn't care what people thought about me to a certain extent, because I was my own person. But I did understand discipline and conforming to things I needed to conform to. But my motto in the corporate world was, get forgiven, not permission. And as long as I lived that way in the corporate world, it worked. It worked for me. But what I do know is that each of you have had situations in your life that you've had to really think about, what is your truth? You know, think about having to speak your truth in a meeting if the direction that everyone's going is really not the best direction. And you're going to want to be the one that stands up and says, well, I have an idea. And, you know, you may be going against what everybody else wants, but what you have may be the answer. But you're afraid to speak that. Or maybe it's in your family. There's something going on in your family, and everybody wants to hide it. Everybody wants to sweep it under the rug. And you're like, you know what? I feel like I've been guided. I'm the one that's supposed to open this up. I'm the one that's supposed to be the catalyst to speak the truth that no one else wants to speak. You know, to say that Granny May, you know, had affairs and no one wants to talk about it, you know. And this is, you know, this goes on in families all the time. And so eventually somebody has to speak their truth. But when you open that door, sometimes it opens a world of peace, love, connection, serenity, and spiritual connection. So as you look at this guide that I've given you, it's going to give you some questions to ask yourself on a daily basis. It really emphasizes to speak your truth without anger or aggression. And that's hard sometimes for all of us, especially if we're being triggered. And then also, how to speak from your soul. And this gives you a couple of examples and tools. Learn how to breathe if you're getting nervous, if you have to say something that you believe that you should say to someone. Statements is, like it said, use the statements, I feel instead of you always do this. Another way to open up conversations or to address a conversation or speaking your truth with someone is using the term, are you aware that you do this? Are you aware that this has been your behavior? Because sometimes people are not aware of their behavior. And if you say that in a very calm manner and you connect with that person, they might ask the question, well, what am I doing? And then you could share. But again, you have to share that in a way that doesn't feel aggressive or attacking that individual. The other phrase that I always like is, if someone's criticizing you or not agreeing or whatever, is you can always use a statement, that's interesting. Because that neutralizes the conversation. And you can even say, that's interesting. Would you tell me more about that? And that opens the door for them to maybe speak about that rather than accusing you about that. These are phrases that are, in my opinion, are magic phrases. Sometimes too is say less. And the example that I have here is like, you can look at someone and say, I love you. And you can say that very authentically. But if you say like, oh, I love you, I couldn't live without you, you flow through my veins, my heart cries for you. If you go on and on and on, it's like you're trying to convince someone that you love them. Instead of speaking the truth from your heart, is that I love you. That's powerful. And we tend to over-explain about everything, unless that's our job. Unless we're supposed to explain and give the most details that we can give that can help someone. But it is important to first get clear with yourself. Who am I? What are my values? I mean, they don't teach this in school. Like we don't have exercises with our children to say, what are your values? Most values comes from the family, from the parents, from the mother and the father, the brothers and the sisters. And I was always told if you teach good values when children are young, they'll carry those into their adulthood. Even though they may have some rebellious time periods, which many of them do, but they eventually come back to the values that you taught them. And that's why, but you must know your values before you teach your children those values. And so it is about really passing on what you've learned about yourself and how you can share that with your family. And then also, we talk about, again, anger. There's so much anger in the world right now. And I know a lot of people are, let's put it this way. There's a lot of people who aren't going to speak their truth, who don't feel like they need to. And they don't, because a lot of what's going on, especially on the internet and in social media, a lot of what's going on is just to engage people in conversation or accusation. That's what I see all the time now. And then people get triggered, and then so in reality, there's a lot of people, and myself included. I'm like, that's not for me. I got work to do. I need to do Soul Sunday. I need to be teaching classes. I need to be sharing what spirituality is. I need to be helping people that are feeling this pain, people that feeling as though they have to defend themselves. I want to be able to share with them to help them move forward. That's my job. My job is not to stand up and tell you what all my political views are, my personal views are, my family views are. That's not my job. I mean, I incorporate that into when I work with others, but my job is to help others have a better life. Is to help others feel as though they're connected to their soul. And to give them ways and opportunities and exercises to go out and feel successful and to be loved. And then share what you learn with others. That's what my job is. And so I don't feel like that I have to respond to anything. And the other day, I'm in this one group. It's a spiritual group, and I know all of the women that are in it very well because we've been friends for 20 years. And two of them started this debate with each other, and I'm just reading all this going, what are you guys doing? What is going on with you two? Stop it. Tell each other you love each other. That's what it's all about. Stop it. But they can't stop it because they have to defend themselves. They have to be right. And honestly, I'm not in a place right now of having to be right. I'm in a place of doing what I believe I came here to do. And that's what I want to be able to encourage all of you to do, is to do what you came here to do. You don't have to be right. And as long as you know who you are and you start working on, this is who I am a powerful person, then you're going to be okay. You will be okay. And you'll learn along the way. You will literally learn along the way. And I know some of you have challenges in your life right now. And a lot of that challenge can go away by not worrying about what they may say to you if you speak truthfully. And as long as, and do it in a way that you feel like that they can hear it. And then let it go. You never know what you might say to someone that might make a difference in their life and might open them up. And sometimes when we come from a loving place, that's when people open up. You say, I know you're having a hard time. I know you've got difficulties in your life, and I can respect that. But are you aware this is what you're doing? This is what you're doing to yourself. This is what you're doing to your family, or this is what you're doing to others. Are you aware of that? Because you should pay attention to that. You know, if you've got someone that's really creating chaos in their own life, and it's like expanding around everyone. And sometimes that does make a difference. Sometimes people listen, and especially if you're coming from a place of love in a conversation like that, you will be surprised of the energy shift, the energy exchange. And I know I've heard people say, you know, let's say partners who love each other but they're having difficulty, and the one partner just doesn't believe that the other partner is being truthful. As long as you're believing that, you're sending them energy to be that way. You've heard, I know you've seen it in movies, we've seen it in shows, but when someone accuses someone over and over, I know you're having an affair, I know you're having an affair. Guess what you're doing? You're sending them energy to have an affair. You know, or I know you're lying to me, I know you're lying to me. You're sending them energy. You have to step back and go, I trust. I'm going to trust 100%. Now, maybe they are doing something that you believe, but if you start trusting that, I'm not going to accuse them of that anymore. I'm not going to accuse my manager is harassing me, okay? Well, you know what? One, I'm going to stand up for myself, but two, I'm going to step back and think, why is that person harassing me? What's going on within that person, and how could I maybe try to understand that? And or can I just send energy, do my job, and just send energy to that person, to whatever's going on with them, that they work on it. And I don't get that energy back on me. And I've seen that work. I've been in the corporate world for a long time, and I've seen that work. And I've seen people be victims in their job or in their family. You know, this is always happening to me, but that is the energy that they're sending. And the other thing is, my favorite motto, what you focus on expands. So if you focus on this, it's going to grow. Simple, simple motto. What you focus on expands. If you're negative all the time, guess what? You're surrounded with negativity. So that is really, I guess, the best summary that I can give you today on not caring what other people think about you. It's none of your business. Move forward. Live your life. Find the love within yourself. Find the peace within yourself. Find their point of view, your voice, and work on that every day. Work on it every day. And when you do, you'll be better for it. Any thoughts, questions? Oh, I know somebody has questions or thoughts. Yeah? So you're all ready? You know, you have your voice, you're going to work on your values?
I just want to say thank you. Everything that you said today resonated with me. I came here out of curiosity, and now I realize it was more validation. I have been on a road to self-discovery for a while now, and I feel very happy and blessed that everything you said today, I was like, okay, I'm doing this. There's still some tweaks, and I'm sure until I die, that's how it will be. But thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. And you know, that is how it is. When you say you're on the road to discovery, we're on the road to discovery for forever. It's, to me, it's unlimited in what we can learn. And the knowledge that's out there, the people that we can interact with, It's unlimited, and if you seek it, it will show up in your life, you know. Good people, good learning, good situations. And I feel a lot of times people say that whatever I've talked about is a good validation for them, because they were feeling that, or they had just had a situation where it was occurring within them, and they just needed to hear it again. They needed to know that you're supported, because you are supported. There's more people out there that'll support you than those that won't support you. You just have to find them, and you can find them. So, well, thank you for being here today, and I look forward to you coming back, hopefully next week, and bring a friend. And my goal is to fill this room eventually with, I want to run out of chairs if I can. So, thanks for being here. Yeah. And if you want, we certainly have time if you want to get to know each other and stick around. I do have a message circle at 1 o'clock, but so about 12:45 I'll be changing the room around, but you're welcome to stay and have conversation with each other, get to know each other. So, thank you.